The restaurant sat quietly on a wide city street where luxury cars passed slowly and glass buildings reflected the afternoon sun. Inside, everything looked expensive but calm. Soft music played in the background. Tables were spaced far apart, covered with clean white cloths. The smell of fresh bread and warm food floated through the air. It was the kind of place where people spoke softly and expected everything to be perfect. Around lunchtime, an affluent woman walked in. Her clothes were neat, stylish, and clearly costly. Her posture showed confidence, almost pride. She looked around with sharp eyes, as if measuring the place the moment she stepped inside. A host greeted her politely and led her to a table near the window. The woman sat down, placed her handbag carefully on the chair beside her, and glanced around again, already forming opinions. A waitress soon approached the table. She looked simple and professional. Her uniform was clean, her hair tied back neatly, her face calm. She greeted the woman with a polite smile and asked if she would like something to drink. The woman nodded without returning the smile and ordered sparkling water, her tone firm and short. The waitress wrote it down carefully and walked away. From the beginning, the affluent woman noticed every small thing. She checked the table setting, the silverware, the glass. When the water arrived, she commented that the glass was placed slightly to the left instead of the right. The waitress apologized softly and fixed it immediately. Her voice remained respectful, and her expression did not change. As the woman looked at the menu, she asked several questions. Some were normal, but others felt unnecessary. She asked about ingredients that were clearly listed and about cooking times that were already explained. Each time, the waitress answered patiently. She did not rush, did not sigh, and did not show irritation. She listened carefully, making sure the woman felt heard. Other diners noticed the interaction. A couple at a nearby table exchanged brief glances. They could sense the tension, even though no harsh words were spoken. The affluent woman seemed to expect something extra, something beyond normal service, and she was clearly not satisfied. When the food arrived, it was presented neatly and with care. The waitress described the dish in a calm voice and asked if there was anything else needed. The woman tasted the food and paused. She did not complain directly, but her face showed doubt. She mentioned that the food was warm, not hot. The waitress offered to take it back and have it reheated or replaced. The woman waved her hand slightly, as if dismissing the offer, and said it was fine. Throughout the meal, the waitress checked in quietly, making sure the glass was filled and the table remained clean. Each time, the affluent woman responded with short answers. There was no thank you, no smile. Still, the waitress continued her work with the same calm manner. Inside the kitchen, staff members moved quickly. They worked as a team, communicating softly but clearly. Some of them noticed the way the woman treated the waitress. They did not say much, but they watched. The waitress had earned their respect quickly since joining the restaurant. She helped when needed, stayed late without complaint, and treated everyone kindly. The meal slowly came to an end. The affluent woman wiped her lips, looked at her watch, and leaned back in her chair. She seemed ready to leave. The waitress approached again and asked if she would like dessert or coffee. The woman declined and asked for the bill. When the bill was placed on the table, the woman picked it up and examined it closely. She checked each item, her eyes moving carefully down the page. Everything was correct. She reached into her handbag and pulled out her wallet. She placed the exact amount needed for the bill on the tray. There was a brief pause. The waitress stood quietly, waiting. In places like this, tipping was expected. The amount did not need to be large, but it was a common sign of appreciation. The woman looked at the tray again, then at the waitress. Her expression was cold but calm. She said that service should not be rewarded unless it was exceptional. Her voice was not loud, but it was clear. She added that doing one's job was not a reason to expect extra money. Then she stood up, picked up her handbag, and prepared to leave. The waitress did not argue. She did not show anger or disappointment. She simply nodded slightly and thanked the woman for visiting the restaurant. Her voice remained steady. Those nearby noticed the moment. Some felt uncomfortable. Others felt sympathy. As the woman walked toward the exit, she felt satisfied with herself. In her mind, she believed she had made a point. She believed respect came from status and success, not from simple roles. She did not look back. The waitress collected the tray and walked toward the service area. One of the staff members looked at her and quietly asked if she was okay. She smiled gently and said it was fine. Her calmness surprised them. There was no sign of hurt, at least not on the surface. Later that afternoon, the restaurant atmosphere changed slightly. Staff members were asked to prepare for a meeting in the evening. This was unusual. No details were given, but the request came directly from senior management. The waitress listened quietly, saying nothing. As the day continued, she moved through the restaurant with purpose. She watched how tables were cleaned, how guests were greeted, and how small issues were handled. She noticed everything, from the tone of voices to the speed of service. Her eyes missed nothing. By the time evening approached, the restaurant was full again. Lights were adjusted, music softened, and the staff gathered small notes in their minds, unsure of what the meeting would bring. The waitress changed out of her uniform and disappeared briefly into a private room. Outside, the affluent woman drove away, already forgetting the place. She had no idea that her small decision, made so casually, was about to become part of a much bigger moment. What seemed like an ordinary lunch was only the beginning of a story that would soon surprise everyone involved. The first part of the story closes quietly, with no loud drama and no raised voices. Just small actions, calm reactions, and a sense that something important is waiting just ahead. The afternoon moved slowly after the lunch rush faded. Plates were cleared, tables wiped, and chairs pushed back into perfect lines. The restaurant felt calmer now, but not empty. Soft music continued to play, and sunlight shifted across the floor as time passed. The waitress moved through the space with quiet focus, her steps light, her posture relaxed. To anyone watching, she looked like any other worker finishing a long shift, but her eyes stayed alert, taking in every detail. She paused near the service station, checking notes written earlier in the day. These notes were not about orders or table numbers. They were observations. She noticed how long guests waited to be greeted, how quickly issues were fixed, and how staff supported each other when the room became busy. She had learned long ago that real truth showed itself in ordinary moments, not in rehearsed ones. In the kitchen, a few workers talked quietly while preparing for the evening service. Some mentioned the lunchtime guest who left without tipping. The tone was not angry, just tired. One worker said it happened often. Another shrugged and said it was part of the job. The waitress listened without joining the conversation. She understood both sides, but she also believed that every action, no matter how small, revealed something deeper. She remembered the look on the woman's face when the bill was paid. It was not cruel, just distant. It was the look of someone who believed she was always right. The waitress did not feel insulted. Instead, she felt curious. She wondered how many people lived their lives without seeing those around them. Later in the afternoon, the manager walked through the dining area, checking reservations for the evening. The manager greeted staff politely but seemed slightly tense. There was something different in the air, something unspoken. When the waitress met the manager's eyes, there was a brief pause. A nod followed. Nothing more was said. The waitress went to the back hallway and stepped into a small office. Inside, there were files neatly stacked and a window overlooking the kitchen. She sat down for a moment, taking a deep breath. She looked calm, but her mind was active. This restaurant meant more to her than most people realized. It was not just a business. It was a long-term dream built with patience, planning, and risk. Years earlier, she had learned the value of working quietly. She had seen how people behaved when they thought no one important was watching. She had also learned that respect could not be demanded. It had to be shown first. That belief guided her choices even now. As the afternoon shifted into early evening, staff members began preparing for the dinner crowd. Fresh tablecloths were placed, menus were replaced, and candles were lit. The waitress returned to the floor, once again in her uniform, blending easily into the rhythm of service. New guests arrived, dressed in suits, dresses, and casual business wear. Laughter returned to the room, along with the sound of glasses clinking. The waitress greeted guests warmly, offering the same level of care she had shown earlier in the day. No one received special treatment. No one was ignored. At one table, a family struggled with a complicated order. At another, a guest spilled a drink by accident. Each time, the waitress responded quickly, calmly, and without judgment. Other staff followed her lead. The atmosphere remained smooth, even when things went wrong. From time to time, her eyes moved toward the entrance, not because she expected anyone in particular, but because she was always aware of the space. She noticed how people entered, how they looked around, how they treated the host. Small signs spoke loudly if one knew how to read them. Meanwhile, across the city, the affluent woman went on with her day. Meetings, phone calls, and short conversations filled her time. The restaurant became just another place she had visited. She did not think about the waitress again. To her, the moment had already passed. Back at the restaurant, a quiet message spread among staff that the evening meeting would take place after the last guests left. No one complained, but curiosity grew. Some wondered if it was about new rules or changes. Others guessed it might involve promotions or inspections. The waitress continued working until her shift ended. When it did, she did not rush to leave. She helped a coworker reset tables and stayed until the floor was spotless. Only then did she excuse herself and head back to the small office. She changed out of her uniform slowly, folding it with care. From a drawer, she took out a simple jacket and slipped it on. Her reflection in the mirror looked different now. Not richer or more powerful, just more complete. She smiled slightly, not out of pride, but out of readiness. As staff began gathering in the dining area for the meeting, the lights were adjusted again. The room felt different without guests. Chairs were empty, tables quiet. Voices echoed softly. Everyone stood or sat where they could, waiting. The manager stepped forward and asked everyone to give a moment of attention. The tone was serious but respectful. The waitress stood near the side, hands relaxed, eyes focused. She looked like she belonged there, not above anyone, not below anyone. Before the meeting could begin, a door near the entrance opened briefly. Someone from the office stepped out and whispered something to the manager. The manager nodded, took a breath, and looked back at the group. There was a sense of anticipation now. Whatever was coming mattered. The waitress felt it too, but her expression stayed calm. She had waited a long time for this moment, not for recognition, but for understanding. The story had not reached its turning point yet, but the pieces were moving closer together. Small choices made earlier in the day were beginning to connect in ways no one expected. The waitress stood quietly among the staff, knowing that soon, the truth would no longer be hidden behind a uniform. The second part of the story ends with that quiet pause, just before everything changes, when ordinary people stand on the edge of something meaningful without fully realizing it yet. The room stayed quiet as everyone waited. The soft hum of the air system filled the space, and a few staff members shifted their weight, unsure of what to expect. The manager cleared their throat and thanked everyone for staying late. There was a pause, long enough to raise curiosity but not long enough to cause worry. Then the manager spoke about the restaurant's journey, how it had grown, and how change was sometimes necessary to move forward. People listened closely. Some crossed their arms, others leaned forward. The waitress stood near the side, her face calm, her eyes attentive. She looked comfortable, as if she had already accepted whatever was about to happen. The manager explained that the restaurant had gone through a careful review over the past few months. Customer experience, staff treatment, and daily operations were all examined. The goal, the manager said, was to build a place where respect moved in every direction, not just from staff to guests, but from guests to staff as well. A few workers exchanged looks. This sounded serious. It also sounded hopeful. Then the manager mentioned that the ownership had officially changed earlier that day. A quiet wave of surprise moved through the room. No one spoke, but the shift in energy was clear. People wondered who the new owner was and why this had not been announced earlier. The manager took a step back and gestured toward the side of the room. The waitress was invited forward. At first, no one understood. Some thought she was being asked to help with something small. Others assumed she was being recognized for good work. She walked slowly to the center, her step steady. She stopped beside the manager and faced the group. The manager introduced her as the new owner of the restaurant. For a moment, no one reacted. The words seemed to hang in the air, waiting to be understood. Then faces changed. Eyes widened. A few mouths opened slightly. Someone near the back let out a quiet breath of surprise. The waitress stood there without smiling. She did not raise her chin or change her posture. She simply looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the people she had worked beside. The manager stepped aside and gave her the space to speak. She began by thanking everyone for their hard work. Her voice was clear but gentle. She spoke slowly, choosing simple words. She said she had spent time working in the restaurant because she wanted to understand it from the inside. She wanted to know what worked well and what needed improvement. She wanted to see how people treated each other when no one important seemed to be watching. She spoke about respect. She said it was easy to demand it, but harder to practice it. She explained that uniforms did not define value, and job titles did not measure worth. The room stayed silent as her words settled. Some staff members nodded. Others looked down, thinking. No one interrupted. She continued, saying that she believed a restaurant should be a place where dignity was never optional, where mistakes were handled with patience, and effort was noticed even when it went unpraised. She said she had seen kindness during busy hours and calm during stressful moments. She had also seen moments where guests forgot that staff were human. She did not mention the lunchtime incident directly. She did not need to. Those who had been present understood. At that same moment, across town, the affluent woman returned to the restaurant. She had realized she left something behind earlier and decided to stop by quickly. She entered confidently, expecting the same quiet space she remembered. Instead, she walked into a room filled with staff standing together, listening intently. The lights were dimmer than usual, and the atmosphere felt serious. She paused near the entrance, unsure if she should stay or leave. She recognized the waitress at the front of the room. Confusion crossed her face. She listened quietly, her attention pulled in despite herself. As the waitress continued speaking, the affluent woman felt an uncomfortable tightening in her chest. The words sounded different now. They felt personal, though no one looked at her directly. The waitress spoke about small choices, about how people revealed themselves in moments they believed did not matter. She said kindness should not depend on mood, wealth, or expectation. She said true character showed up when there was nothing to gain. The affluent woman shifted her stance. Memories from lunch replayed in her mind. The unpaid tip, the cold tone, the certainty she had felt at the time. The waitress finished her message by saying that changes would be made. Staff would be protected, trained, and supported. Guests would always be welcomed, but disrespect would not be ignored. The restaurant would move forward with clear values. She thanked everyone again and stepped back. The room remained quiet for a moment longer. Then someone began to clap. Slowly, others joined in. The sound grew steady, filling the space with warmth and relief. The waitress nodded slightly, accepting the response without seeking it. The affluent woman stood frozen near the entrance. She realized now that the person she had dismissed earlier was standing before her with calm authority. Embarrassment washed over her, followed by a sharp sense of regret. She considered leaving quietly, pretending she had not heard anything. But her feet would not move. The meeting ended, and staff began to disperse. Some smiled. Some spoke quietly among themselves. The waitress stepped away to speak with the manager. The affluent woman remained where she was, unsure of what to do next. The story had turned, and she stood at the center of a moment she never expected to face. The third part closes with that realization, when power shifts silently, and a simple uniform is no longer able to hide the truth beneath it. The room slowly returned to movement after the meeting ended. Chairs scraped gently against the floor, and quiet conversations began. Some staff members smiled with relief, others looked thoughtful. The energy had changed. It felt lighter, but also more serious, like everyone understood that something important had just happened. The new owner stepped away from the center and spoke briefly with the manager. Their conversation was calm and focused. There was no celebration, no loud emotion. It was clear this moment was not about pride, but responsibility. Near the entrance, the affluent woman still stood in place. She felt out of breath, even though she had not moved. Her confidence from earlier in the day was gone. In its place was discomfort, mixed with embarrassment. She suddenly felt very visible, even though no one was looking directly at her. She watched the staff members break into small groups. Some laughed quietly. Others talked about work schedules or plans for the next day. The waitress she had ignored earlier now moved through the room with quiet authority, speaking kindly to everyone. The affluent woman took a step forward, then stopped. She was unsure if she should speak or leave. Her mind replayed the lunchtime scene again and again. The exact amount of money placed on the tray. The firm words about service and reward. At the time, it had felt reasonable. Now it felt small. She noticed how the staff looked at the new owner. There was respect there, but also comfort. This was not fear or forced obedience. It was trust. That realization made her chest tighten. As the room slowly emptied, the affluent woman finally moved. She walked toward the new owner, her steps hesitant. Her posture was different now, less rigid, more uncertain. When she reached her, she paused. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The new owner looked at her calmly, her expression open but unreadable. The affluent woman spoke first. Her voice was quiet. She said she wanted to apologize for how she behaved earlier. She admitted she had been dismissive and unfair. The words did not come easily, but once they started, they felt necessary. The new owner listened without interrupting. She did not cross her arms or look away. She simply listened. When the affluent woman finished, there was another pause. The room around them felt distant, as if the moment existed on its own. The new owner thanked her for the apology. Her tone was polite but steady. She said that everyone had moments they wished they could change. What mattered was whether they learned from them. She explained that tipping was not just about money. It was about acknowledgement. It was a small way of saying that someone's effort had been seen. She said no one was forced to give it, but choosing not to, especially after receiving respectful service, sent a message. The affluent woman nodded slowly. She said she understood now. She admitted that she had often judged people based on their roles, not their character. Saying it out loud made her feel exposed, but also lighter. The new owner said that the restaurant welcomed all kinds of guests, but it also stood for fairness. She said she did not believe in public shame or punishment. Instead, she believed in quiet lessons that stayed with people longer. The affluent woman looked down for a moment, then reached into her handbag. She pulled out some money and held it out. It was more than a tip. It was an attempt to fix what had already passed. The new owner gently shook her head. She said the moment for that had passed. She explained that respect could not be paid after the fact. It had to be given when it mattered. Those words landed heavily. The affluent woman swallowed and nodded again. She understood that this was not rejection, but honesty. She thanked the new owner for her time and turned to leave. As she walked toward the exit, she noticed the same details she had ignored earlier. The soft lighting, the careful table settings, the calm way staff spoke to one another. It all looked different now. Outside, the city air felt cooler. She stood for a moment before getting into her car. She did not rush away this time. She sat quietly, thinking. Inside the restaurant, the new owner gathered the remaining staff. She spoke briefly, thanking them again. She reminded them that the restaurant's success depended on mutual respect. She promised to stand behind them when challenges arose. Staff members listened closely. Some felt emotional. Others felt proud. They returned home that night feeling valued in a way they had not felt before. The new owner stayed behind after everyone left. She walked through the empty dining room alone. She ran her hand lightly over the backs of chairs and paused by the window where the affluent woman had sat earlier. She did not feel anger. She felt clarity. Moments like that confirmed why she had chosen to reveal herself slowly rather than announce her position from the start. The fourth part of the story ends quietly, with changed hearts and unspoken understanding. No shouting, no revenge, just a clear reminder that how people treat others in small moments often matters more than they realize. Morning light returned to the city in a quiet, steady way. The restaurant opened its doors as usual, but something felt different. It was not visible in the decor or the menu. It was in the way people greeted each other, in the way voices carried warmth instead of routine. The new owner arrived early, not to be seen, but to listen. She walked through the dining area slowly, checking small details that most people ignored. She adjusted a chair, straightened a menu, and paused near the service station to ask how the night before had gone. Her questions were simple and her attention was full. Staff members noticed. They felt it. Word from the previous evening spread quickly among the team. Not as gossip, but as reassurance. People spoke about values, about fairness, about being supported. Some who had worked in many places said they had never seen leadership like this. Others simply smiled and got back to work with renewed energy. By midday, the restaurant filled again. Regular guests returned, unaware of the change in ownership, but sensitive to the atmosphere. Service felt smoother. Conversations flowed more easily. Small problems were solved quickly without tension. At one table, a guest thanked a server for patience. At another, someone asked a cook to share a compliment. These moments were small, but they added up. Across town, the affluent woman woke earlier than usual. The events of the previous day still sat heavily in her mind. She replayed the conversation, the calm refusal, the clear message. It had been uncomfortable, but it had also been honest. She dressed for work, but her usual sense of confidence felt quieter. Not weaker, just more thoughtful. She paused before leaving her home, looking at her reflection, wondering when she had last truly considered how her actions affected others. Later that day, she found herself thinking about the restaurant again. Not about the food or the setting, but about the people. About how easily she had judged without knowing. That realization stayed with her through meetings and calls. Back at the restaurant, the new owner joined the lunch service briefly. Not to supervise, but to support. She helped clear plates when needed and stepped aside when things ran smoothly. Guests saw her as part of the team, not above it. One server made a small mistake with an order. Instead of panic, there was calm. The issue was fixed, and the guest remained satisfied. The server later said they felt safe enough to learn, not afraid to fail. In the afternoon, the new owner gathered a small group of staff to discuss ideas. She asked what could be improved and what should be protected. She listened more than she spoke. Suggestions were written down, not dismissed. The restaurant continued to grow, not just in business, but in spirit. Turnover slowed. Smiles became real. Effort felt noticed. Days later, the affluent woman returned to the restaurant. This time she arrived quietly. She did not expect special treatment and did not ask for it. She waited patiently to be seated and thanked the host sincerely. She was served by a different staff member, but the same sense of respect was present. She noticed how the team worked together, how they supported one another without being asked. When the bill arrived, she paid and left a thoughtful tip without hesitation. It was not done to prove anything. It was done with understanding. As she stood to leave, her eyes met the new owners from across the room. There was no confrontation, no words exchanged, just a brief nod. It was enough. Outside, the city continued its rush, unaware of the quiet changes happening inside a single restaurant. But those changes mattered. They rippled outward, carried by people who had learned something real. The new owner closed the day by walking through the restaurant once more. She turned off lights, checked locks, and stood for a moment in the empty space. She felt tired, but it was a good kind of tired. She thought about why she had chosen this path. Not for praise, not for power, but for balance. For a place where dignity was not optional and kindness was not rare. The story does not end with applause or punishment. It ends with awareness, with people choosing to see one another more clearly, with small actions carrying meaning. And in that quiet ending, the lesson remains simple. How someone treats others when it seems to matter least often reveals who they truly are.